Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today I'm going to make a hemostat mandala and I'm going to use curved hemostats on the full length of the shirt. I'm going to start by centering the shirt, and this process is going to go really fast, but down below this video in the description, I have a link to another video which shows how to center a shirt. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm getting both halves of the front of the shirt right up next to each other and both halves of the back of the shirt right up next to each other. That way, whenever I apply the dye or I do any process to the shirt, when you look at the front of the shirt, both halves of the front are going to look very much the same, and the same thing with the back of the shirt. To fold the mandala, I'm going to begin by using a washable marker and making a mark where I'd like for the center of the mandala to be. I like to usually start mine just a little bit below the armpit of the shirt. Then I'm going to place a straight edge on that mark and fold the hem of the shirt up to that straight edge, essentially folding the shirt in half. Then I'm going to grab the hem of the shirt and fold it down part way, kind of like I was starting to fold a paper airplane. I'm going to pinch that new seam that was formed and lift the shirt up off the table. When I do that, it causes the top of the shirt to fold down, and then I'm going to fold each side down one more time. This is forming an 8-point mandala. If I wanted to form a 16-point mandala, I would make one more fold on each side of the shirt. Since I'm using hemostats on this shirt, I'm going to stop here because if I fold a 16-point mandala, the shirt and the fabric will be too thick for my hemostats. I'm also going to use my washable marker and mark where the neck of the shirt is, just so that I can kind of keep tabs on where that is. I'm going to go ahead and extend these hemostats beyond the neck of the shirt, so for this particular shirt, it wasn't really important that I do that. It's just kind of a habit, so I went ahead and did it. Like I said, I'm going to use curved hemostats for this design, so I'm sorting my curved hemostats into 12-inch and 10-inch hemostats. I do have a few hemostats that are smaller, but I'm not going to use those on this shirt. I'm also going to apply the hemostats in pairs. You can also see that I've coated my hemostats with heat shrink tubing. I've done that so that the hemostats or the teeth of the hemostats won't damage the fabric. I purchased the heat shrink tubing at either Lowe's or Home Depot in the electrical department. I placed a piece of the heat shrink tubing over each side of the hemostats on the teeth, then used a heat gun to shrink it down to fit. If there was any of the tubing left hanging over the end of the hemostat, I just used a pair of scissors to trim it to fit. So to apply the hemostats to the shirt, I applied one hemostat down at the very end with the curve facing down. I kind of applied it a little bit at an angle. Then from here, I'm going to alternate placing hemostats on the side of the shirt. And for this shirt, I'm going to take the hemostats the whole width of the shirt, at least for as long as my hemostats are large enough that I can do that. I'm going to apply the hemostats in pairs with the curve facing the other pair of hemostats, essentially making a small section on the shirt where I can apply the dye. Once the 10-inch hemostats become too small to reach all the way across the shirt, I'm going to switch and start using the 12-inch hemostats. At this point, the 12-inch hemostats aren't really going the full width of the shirt either, so I'm only going to take them halfway. I'm going to continue this process until I'm all the way out to the edge of the shirt. Now I'm going to use some small rubber bands and place the small rubber bands around the handles of each pair of hemostats. That will help keep the hemostats from popping and flying across the room. They may come unattached, but they'll pretty much stay in the same place on the shirt. Then after I have rubber bands on all the hemostats, I'm going to put this shirt on a metal rack so that it can get some airflow around it and allow it to dry out completely. I get better color saturation in the center of thick folds like mandalas if I allow them to dry out completely before I apply the dye. If you'd like a little more information about this topic, I have a blog post out on my website addressing why I like to dye items like this when they're completely dry. And I have a link to my website down below this video in the description. Okay, so the shirt is completely dry, and for this shirt, I've pulled a variety of pinks, blues, and purples. For my setup, I have the shirt on the long metal rack, and I have that rack over the top of a long plastic tote. Then I need to make myself an ice barrier, and to do that, I'm going to use some silicone cake molds, which I'm going to place in between the hemostats. Then to hold them together, I'm going to use some wooden clothespins to attach the silicone cake molds together. Because the shirt is completely dry, I'm going to lightly spray it with a little bit of a soda ash solution that I've placed inside of a spray bottle. This will help the dye to stick to the top of the shirt a little bit better. So when you're looking at the shirt, the hemostats form sections at the top of the shirt and at the bottom of the shirt. In the hemostat sections that are on the top of the shirt, I'm going to place blue colors. And in those sections, I'm placing sapphire blue, royal blue, alpine blue, and Grecian sea, which are all Dharma Trading Company colors. Then in the bottom sections, I'm going to place purple colors. And the purples that I'm going to use are Plum Blossom and Plum, which are Dharma Trading Company colors, True Violet from Grateful Dyes, and Royal Purple from Dye Spin. In the remaining spaces, I'm going to use pink colors. In the area that's going to be the center of the mandala, I'm going to use Lollipop from Delula Company. Then the remaining sections that you see white, most of them until I get out toward the edge of the shirt, will only hold one color. So I'm going to place one color in each of those sections, starting with Passion Fruit from Custom Colors, Amethyst from Dharma Trading Company, Strawberry from Custom Colors, Razzle Dazzle from Dharma, Dragon Fruit from Dharma, Raspberry from Dharma, and Pro Chemicals Cherry Blush and Cotton Candy. When I get out to the area where the hemostats don't go the full width of the shirt, I'm applying two colors into that space. For the very last little area of fabric outside of my hemostats, I'm going to add a little bit more additional lollipop from Delula Company. Then over the top of the dye, I'm going to add a little bit more additional dry soda ash. Then I'm going to add on some ice. And I want to go ahead and incline this shirt just a little bit. So if I add bagged ice, it's just going to fall off the edge because I couldn't really do an ice barrier very easily down at the bottom of the shirt. So I'm going to use a few more unusual ice cubes. I purchased these plastic containers, which I think are intended to use in a desk for pencils at the Dollar Tree dollar store. I fill them with ice and I make these really long ice cubes, which I can use in my vinyl guttering. I'm going to place 2 of these at the end of the shirt. That way, whenever I incline the shirt, it's not going to slide off because they're just too large ice cubes to slide off. For the rest of the shirt, I'm going to use some cubes which I made in some ice trays. They're a little bit larger cubes, so hopefully they'll melt about the same time these really large cubes at the end melt. I also want to incline the shirt, but because all the hemostats are sticking out beyond the edge of the rack, I can't just place one end of this rack down in the bottom of the container. So I'm only going to be able to incline it a little bit because I'm going to take a metal basket, turn it upside down in the bottom of my container, and put one end of the metal rack down on top of that container. It's going to incline it, but not as much as I normally would incline a shirt like this. After I inclined the shirt, I placed it aside to allow the ice to melt. And after all this ice melted, I did have just a couple little areas of undissolved dye left on the shirt. For the most part, the dye had gone through the shirt really well because these cubes are pretty big, so I forced quite a bit of liquid through the shirt. I added just a couple more ice cubes on some of that undissolved dye and allowed those to melt as well. Then after all the ice melted, I left the shirt to process for about 48 hours before I began rinsing it. To rinse the shirt, I took it to my utility sink and I began rinsing it in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. Then I went ahead and took the rubber bands off of the hemostats, unattached the hemostats from the shirt, and then I warmed the water up to hot and continued rinsing in hot water to try to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. Instead of rinsing for a long time, I went ahead and ran some really hot water in my utility sink, added some Blue Dawn dish soap to the water, placed the shirt inside, and allowed the shirt to soak. When the water cooled off, I changed it out and I continued that soaking process until my water was remaining almost clear. Then I placed the shirt along with some Dharma's professional textile detergent into my washing machine and I washed it using a hot water cycle. Okay, so the shirt has been washed, dried, and ironed, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, so what do you guys think? I think this one turned out really pretty. I was kind of aiming for an Autumn Alien, where you put the hemostats on and then you do an incline, but I wasn't able to do as much of an incline as I wanted to do on the shirt. So I don't really have the kind of dye flow that I normally get with an Autumn Alien, but I do think it's a really pretty shirt. I like the purple, the blue, and the pink together, and I like taking this design all the way out to the edge of the shirt. When I applied all the blue dyes on one side of the shirt and all the purple dyes on the sections of hemostats on the other side of the shirt, what ends up happening is the shirt alternates between a line of blue and a line of purple and a line of blue, and you can see that really well on this shirt. Also, the pinks that I used in between the purples and the blues on this shirt are all fairly close in color. Pinks can be kind of tough to ice dye with sometimes. Some of the pinks don't show up so great, and most of the pinks don't have a ton of color splits. Some do, but not a whole lot of them, especially not when they're used the way I used these pinks. So they're fairly close in color, but I do see some variation, and I think that looks really pretty. So for the most part, I really love this shirt. Like I said, I couldn't incline it enough for the dye to flow enough to become like a full-on Autumn Alien, but I really do like extending the hemostat sections all the way out to the edge. And I think those little areas that were formed do kind of look like little spaceships, which I think is fun. So for the most part, I love this shirt. I think it's really pretty. Love the colors, love the design on it. But what do you guys think? Please drop me some comments down below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.